Hello and welcome back to the On The Ball podcast. This is episode 132 of the show, and we are once again here to talk about the NRL. This is a review / preview of round 11 and a preview towards round 12. Almost Origin time, which is always very exciting in the NRL world. Who knows where that's going to be played, as it is currently Wednesday and Melbourne looks like it's on the verge of a lockdown, so that could be moved. Apparently Canberra is on the cards as another venue, and Adelaide and Perth are also backup plans, but I'm sure they'll do everything they can to have it here in Melbourne. I've got tickets, so I would be pretty shattered if that got cancelled, but obviously everyone's health and safety comes first. But if it's not in Melbourne, I'd like to see it in Canberra. I just think it would look better in a smaller stadium, and you'd be able to get a few there. Whereas Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth, they get big crowds there normally when they go there, but with short notice, you're playing in bigger stadiums, probably wouldn't be as good as a look, and the atmosphere probably wouldn't be as good, even though you might only get 10 or 15k at Canberra. Well, you'd probably sell it out because you'd probably get a lot of New South Welshmen travelling down. Same goes for the Queenslanders, but looking at round 11 of the NRL, second week of the crackdown, pretty much most notably, that's still the headlines of everything rugby league at the moment. We'll go game by game here and just have a little bit of a chat about the outcome. Didn't watch every game this weekend in full honesty, but saw most of it, so we'll have a little chat. Alright, Cowboys Knights. Cowboys got the dub here. Look, the Knights are in struggle street at the moment. They were without, for that game, they were without Ponga, Best, and obviously still without Pearce. So when they have those players out, they just don't really have any strike power. They've still got a very good forward pack, which in my opinion means they should be doing better than they are, even without those guns. But right now the Cowboys are just a really well-oiled machine. You look through their team, not too many big names. They've got Val Holmes, Scotty Drinkwater, and then apart from that, the rest aren't household names, but they're all performing very, very well. Well, obviously Jason Taumalolo, but he's been in and out of the side through injury. They've been performing very, very well. I think Todd Payton's shaping like a very, very good coach for the future. What he managed to milk out of that Warriors team last year and what he's managing to milk out of this Cowboys team this year, very impressive. And it's going to be interesting to see how he shapes that team over the next few years. We've already seen some of his early signings with Chad Townsend and Tommy Dearden. But I guess this is an interesting game. Could, in the future be known as the Jake Clifford Cup, as Jake Clifford's obviously signed with the Knights. Talk about him being released there this week, with Blake Green announcing his retirement effective immediately last night. So that leaves a spot on the roster for the Knights. They've signed him for next year already, so there's push for him to make the move early, which would probably see Tom Dearden let go by the Broncos to Cowboys, which I'd like to see, because no point Tom Dearden playing a whole year in reserve grade in Brisbane. He may as well go to the Cowboys, start applying his trade there, and then Jake Clifford comes and does a role for the Knights before Mitchell Pearce comes back. So I think I would like to see that happen. I think everyone involved gets benefited, and yes, the Broncos, I guess, get nothing out of it, but maybe that spot opens up Billy Walters coming across, which has been heavily rumoured from the Tigers, to go match up with his dad there. So that would be good to see. For that, in that situation, all parties would benefit. I would like to see that in the coming weeks, as there's no point, especially in Tom Dearden's case, in players being held back in reserve grade when they can be playing in other teams. Cowboys, great win. Really good to see them scoring 36 points. Last year they were struggling to put up 20. And then the Knights, disappointing, but all their big stars are back this week, so you would expect to see a bit of a bounce back in performance. Otherwise, I don't know if they would pull the pin this early, but if they keep this form up, I think Adam O'Brien might start to look over his shoulder a little bit. Friday, 6 o'clock game. It didn't look great on paper, but two of the most unpredictable sides historically in the competition in the last, 15, 20 years are the Warriors and the Tigers. And they both turned up to play some really good attacking footy on Friday night. Not much defence from either team. Warriors did have 2 sin bins, but they ended up on top. Reece Walsh put on an absolute clinic. Some of his antics have been scrutinised a little bit, and I do think that's fair. I think he did carry on like a bit of a dick, and at times it was pretty evident that he was happy with his own work and not necessarily getting around the team. But that'll come. It's better that someone have a personality than not. But he looks like an absolute freak. Look, I don't want to have a crack at the Broncos because I'm sick of Tigers having a crack at for letting people go, but you do have to wonder, like, why have they let Reece Walsh leave? Because he looks like he's an absolute freak. To me, he just looks like a carbon copy of Kalen Ponga, to be honest. Not just because of the headgear. Now he's not playing without the headgear, but the way they move, they're so graceful. They can just step on a dime. He looks like he's going to be a really exciting player in the future, and he was really the difference in that game. Reece Walsh, absolute freak. If he doesn't play there, they probably don't win, in my opinion. And look, he's starting at fullback this week. Very exciting for Warriors fans. Looks like they've got one for the future, even when Roger leaves. Tigers fans, it was pretty disappointing. Obviously, scintillating finish to the game. Came down to the very last play. I can't lie, I do think the Tigers actually probably should have scored in that last play. I think they went to the left side. They had about a 4-on-3 or 4-on-2, and I think they just panicked and passed the ball too early. But can't really highlight that. There were some other disappointing areas of the game. I think Tommy Talau's impact in the team is serious. Like, I know to most fans and people watching and listening at home, it's not that important because he's just a bit of a myth. But to a Tigers fan, his impact has been pretty irrelevant all season, and he hasn't really shown much on what has been built since his junior days. So he's been moved to centre this week, so that'll be interesting to see how that affects him. But it's good to see the Tigers scoring points. They obviously keep conceding points, but if you're going to have a leaky defence, you may as well fire a fair few shots, which they have been doing is in recent times, to be fair. Sharks, Dragons was the next one. Look, I don't know. I know this is a rivalry and all, but I don't know who was in the scheduling department here. But for this game to be the Friday primetime game, questions have got to be asked. 25 points scored, which nowadays is the equivalent of 10 points being scored back in the day. Sharks got up. I did tip the Sharks, so I was happy with that one. I actually had a very good week in tipping because I tipped the Warriors as well. The Sharks were just too good for the Dragons. Dragons halves were questioned about not taking the field goal when they had the chance, and then the Sharks snatched it up. So, good win. First win, I believe, since John Morris got sacked, which they really, really needed, and they will hopefully keep that momentum rolling into upcoming weeks. Saturday, we had the Titans Bulldogs. Didn't watch this game. Have no desire to watch the highlights. Titans got the win, which you'd expect. Bulldogs scored 20 points, probably just highlighting Titans' poor defence as usual. But Titans undermanned, had to get the win though, and they did. So well done. Roosters Broncos was probably game of the round in terms of. Oh no, Tigers Warriors got to be game of the round, but Roosters Broncos just had so many storylines coming out of it. I watched the whole game and I was glued to the screen pretty much. Warrior Hargraves and Radley just looked like they were ready to hurt people pretty much from the get-go. And ultimately, that was pretty much the downfall of the Roosters. I know there's a lot of complaints about Victor Radley and his suspension and all that, but you can't argue he had enough warnings. If you watch the game from minute 1 to minute 80, he is told about 5 or 6 times to calm down, whether it be through sin bins, penalties, or just a verbal warning. So I don't think you can really blame the rules. It's almost like, well, when's he going to realise, like, how many times does he have to be told? It was pretty idiotic in my opinion, and he probably deserves the sentence just for being that stupid. But he ultimately, you could say, cost the game. But off the Roosters, they're looking a little bit tired at the moment with so many injuries and suspensions, which is fair. But the Broncos, well done, scoring 34 points against a pretty impressive Roosters defence. Even though they are undermanned, they still have a red-hot crack in defence. So the Broncos to put up 34, very impressive. Albert Kelly looked really, really good. Broncos just, each week it's almost like it's a new Broncos team. One week they rock up and they look like they don't care and they're awful. Then they rock up and have a real hot crack and play some good footy. So I guess the more we see performances like that, the closer they are to, returning to that top 8 position, which they were only a couple of years ago. So that's positive signs for Kevin Walters. I do have to admit, it was pretty random watching the game. There was about four or five blokes who played for the Broncos in like 2010 in that side. There was like Dale Copley and David Mead, and I know Albert Kelly didn't play for the Broncos, I don't think, but he played for the Titans and stuff. So it's a bit of a throwback, but I guess they need some experience and it's working for them. Then Saturday night we had the Raiders Storm. Pretty disappointing blowout. You'd have to say none of the big players playing for either team through injury and suspension. I tipped the Storm. People were getting around the Raiders. I didn't really buy into it. But the Storm were too good, as they have been pretty much every week since round 3 this season. And this game will now be known as George Williams' last game in the NRL, with his release being announced last night. He's been granted release on compassionate grounds, suffering from homesickness, which the stories have been rumbling for a few weeks now. People are firing cracks at him. I saw a headline of James Hooper saying, why was he chatting to rival NRL clubs in the off-season when he was homesick? And I don't know the ins and outs of the story. I think we should just lay off the bloke. I'm sure it's a pretty drastic change living in it on the other side of the world, especially through COVID. So I wouldn't really be having a crack about it in that sense. Though the way it went down was all pretty dramatic, though. The Raiders said he just texted them, said, I'm leaving. But he was saying that he was saying all this stuff, and it's just a debacle, really. He put out a tweet. A lot of the Raiders boys got around the tweet as well. So, look, I have to say Ricky Stewart's position at the club is starting to get pretty worrying, in my opinion. I'm not sure. Maybe there's just a bad few eggs that he needs to get rid of, and then he'll be back to the Raiders of old. But at the moment, it does look like he has lost the dressing room, which we rarely see in NRL. It's a lot more of a soccer thing, but I was talking to my family last night, and once you do lose that dressing room, it's very hard to get it back. And ultimately, the coach tends to go because it's easier to replace one person than 30 people. So, I'd be really, really worried if I was Ricky Stewart right now, especially with the way they're performing on the field. But on the positive side, they have an extra space now. They have reportedly $600K salary cap. They're being linked to Aiden Caesar, Blake Austin, both former Raiders halves. There's a lot of off-contract stars as well who potentially could make the move early, which would be very interesting to see. They first of all need to sort out the dressing room, the culture, and then maybe the results will start coming. Because I don't know what's happening. I don't know who could have predicted this, but right now it's not looking good for the Raiders. I think the George Williams thing, I'm not blaming him or John Bateman at all on a personal level, but I think from now on, if I was a club, I'd probably steer clear of English players for a little bit. I know there's been some great English players. Look at the Burgesses, even the guys we just mentioned, and Whitehead, Hodgson, they've all been great. The Raiders have profited from it massively, but we've seen how quickly 2 departures can ultimately ruin a side. Like, ever since Bateman's left, they've lacked that X factor that he brought to that forward pack. Which, he didn't sign up for like a 10-year contract and then backflip after a year, but, you kind of build your team around them and then all of a sudden they leave, which is fair enough to them, but I probably would steer clear of it in the future. Saying that, the Tigers signed an English centre a few weeks ago, so we'll see how that goes. Then on to the Super Sunday. I know it's Super Saturday, but this Sunday was meant to be Super. Did not live up to the billing at all. Was really excited for it. But look, the Rabbitohs, really, really disappointing. Panthers and Storm just look that far ahead of the rest right now, and you'd have to say Manly probably look the third best at the moment. Panthers put 56 points up on the Rabbitohs. The Rabbitohs' defence is just a disgrace at the moment. Even if they're going to get beaten convincingly by Penrith, you'd think it'd be something a bit more like a 30-10 or a 40-26 or something like that, but to lose 56, to ship 56 and only score 2 tries, really disappointing. They just, at this point, you can almost put them in the Eels category. They just look a bit like flat track bullies. They just only when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and they don't look like they're very tough at the moment. I know people will blame the forwards for it, but you do have to say, I'm going to point out Cody Walker. I know he scored a try late in that game, but He was meant to be one of the stars of the competition, one of their best players, yet he never seems to stand up unless the forwards are absolutely rolling, which I'm not saying is easy, but if you're that good of a player on that, well, I don't know how much money is, but if you're that good of a player and that important to your team, you need to be able to turn it yourself, and then on the back of that, the forwards can get rolling, and then it's a bit of a flow-on effect. You can't really just wait for the game to turn in your favour, which looks like the Rabbitohs do at the moment. It was pretty telling signs that Benji stayed on the bench the whole game. That was almost my huge question of Benji Marshall. I'm sure he can tear up the Titans and the Warriors or whoever they've torn up in recent weeks, but when they get to the big games, will his defence be able to hold up to it? And obviously Wayne Bennett didn't think so that's very interesting. And all the Tigers critics can, maybe swallow a little bit of pride there, you'd have to say. But yeah, Rabbitohs really need to address some questions quickly. And they've got another big game coming up this week as they play the Parramatta Eels. So, big test for them. Some players on the brink of an Origin series who are really out of form. Panthers too good. And at this point, Freddie Fittler just picked the whole Panthers side because I genuinely think they're better than Queensland. But anyway. And then next up, I think the scoreline is a bit stiff. Like, Manly were the better team. They won 28-6. I think it was a bit closer than that suggests. Manly just look unreal right now. For me, as I mentioned before, I'd have them as the third best team in the comp right now. I just think they're looking a lot more dangerous than the likes of the Roosters, Rabbitohs and Eels. So, yeah, really exciting. Well, not like exciting times, but they're I can't even doubt it. They're a very good team to watch when they get going. Turbo's an absolute freak. Josh Schuster put on an absolute clinic on the weekend, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do when they're full strength, as they haven't really been yet so far this year. Does Dill Walker come back into the team? When he's fully fit, it'll be tough because Morgan Harper and Brad Parker are playing very well. When Ciro's back this week on the bench, but when he is fully fit, does he come back into the back row? There's just so many questions. Does Ciro and Olakau'atu play back row? Schuster play 6-4 and get dropped? That's probably the direction I'd lean toward. I know you don't want to risk ruining Schuster's form as he's been killing it in the back row, but I just don't think Foran adds as much as Schuster does, and Ciron and Olakau'atu are very good back rowers. So, good selection headaches for Des Hasler, which you would be laughing at me saying about 8 weeks ago, where they were basically just picking any man and their dog who put on the Manly colours. So, great win. Parramatta once again showing up in a big game, showed that they're nothing more than a team that just, the Dave Warner of Rugby League. They just chow down on some easy conditions, beat the easy teams, and still yet to see anything that suggests they'll have an impact in September. Which is frustrating for Eels fans, as they have been like that for a few seasons now. Moving into my prediction for my top 8. Couple changes this week. I've still got the same top 4 of the Storm, Panthers, Eels and Rabbitohs. The reason I haven't moved Panthers to first, despite having 2 more wins than the Storm, we've seen the Storm in the last few weeks play without their Origin stars, and they have not really looked like they've skipped a beat. So, for me, they've proven themselves that they'll be fine throughout the Origin period, where Panthers yet to see that, which is only 2 or 3 games that Origin affects, but you never know. And so I will say Storm 1, Panthers 2, Eels 3. I still think they're just going to win a lot of games through beating the teams they should beat, as they always do. Rabbitohs 4, similar to the Eels, I just think they'll win the games they should win. And I think eventually they will hit form again and start playing like they were in the first month. So I've got them in 4th. Now I've got Manly up in 5th. As I mentioned, I think Rabbitohs are Manly the 3rd best team right now, but they are a fair few wins off the likes of the Eels. So got them in at 5th, and also Origin will be tough for them, with most their gun players going out to Origin. Got the Roosters down at 6th now from 5th. I just think the number of injuries and suspensions they've copped is starting to catch up to them now. Also, Origin's going to take a hit. So, I still think they might be... Well, I don't know. I don't think they can win the premiership, but they might, cause a few upsets in September. But for me, they're finishing in 6th. I've dropped the Raiders down to 8th and pushed the Titans up to 7th. Still unsure about these 7th and 8th spots. I think that's the top 6. I did say I thought the top 6 was locked a few months ago, but obviously not with the Raiders dropping out for me. I just can't see this Raiders squad missing out on finals. I know it looks like they will pretty easily right now, but surely they're going to have to find form soon, you'd have to think. And then the Titans as well, they just seem to be notching up just enough victories at the moment. And they seem to be a little bit, even though their defence is disappointing, they seem to be a little bit more consistent in terms of knocking off the teams they should than the teams below them. So I've got them 7th. The teams just on the brink, the Warriors and the Cowboys, I think the Warriors are really good. It's also been announced that they're not going to go home, which was always my big concern for the Warriors. I thought that was going to have a negative impact on them. So for them to be staying here, I think that really improves their chances of making finals. I'm going to keep them on the outside of the 8 just for now. I think their defence is a little bit shaky, conceding 26 to the Tigers, but their attack looks really, really good at the moment. And then the Cowboys, they just look like a well-oiled machine that they're just going to win all their games at home pretty much and beat the teams they should away and maybe cause a few upsets here or there. Be interesting to see what happens with the Clifford Dearden thing. That might affect them negatively or positively. But for me, I don't think they're a top 8 team, even though they are racking up the wins right now. So I've still got them sitting just outside. I think the camera might have just cut out there a little bit, so excuse that. But we're back on now. Obviously, the listeners won't care about that. But next up, I talked about my New South Wales team a fortnight ago, and now we're going to address the Queensland team. Obviously, there's been a few changes to that New South Wales lineup that will be put up as a clip on my YouTube channel and Instagram page and Facebook page in the next few days. So check out those links if you haven't already. So there'll be a few changes to those lineups, there's a few suspensions and injuries and stuff like that I didn't take into account at the time because I obviously can't predict the future. But I'll be chatting about my Queensland team today, going through 1 to 17, talking about who's stiff, what I think should happen. Obviously, I know more about the New South Wales team. As a fan of New South Wales, I take more interest in the New South Wales players and stuff like that. And there's probably more options to choose from in the New South Wales team. So this team's a little bit harder, but I used the selector on the NRL website, which made it pretty easy. So fullback, I've got Ponga. I just think I just trust him to have more impact on the game than Brimson. Yeah, Brimson might make a break here or there, but I just think Ponga will be a threat throughout the whole 80 minutes. So I've got Ponga fullback. On the wings, I've got Coates and Holmes. I think I saw some people with Coates and Felt, but I just think Holmes has been in really, really good form for the Cowboys. I know he's a fullback in the league and he hasn't played wing. Well, he's played a bit of wing at the Cowboys, but hasn't really been a winger since his time at the Sharks. But we saw when he used to play Origin that he would always kill it on the wing. He's fast. I can't see why I couldn't be like a bit of a Brian To'o. So I'll have him on the wing. And then Coates is obviously just a beast, and his height will challenge the New South Wales wingers. Gagai and Capewell on the centres. Last year, I think Branko Lee might have played. Obviously, he's not really in contention this year as he's been injured. But, Gagai's the obvious one of Queensland's best players in the last 5 years. And then there's not really another centre in contention, in my opinion. So Kurt Capewell will do a job there again. In the halves, so breaking news today is that Cameron Munster might not be fit for State of Origin, which would be a massive blow, as I believe he was the only reason they won the competition, the series last year. So he would be my 6 if he's fit. If he is injured, look, I think they would pick someone like a Ben Hunt, or I don't think they would pick Corey Norman. There's honestly not many options. What I would actually do is, I know he's never played there in his life, I don't think, but I'd legit pick Kalen Ponga and play him at 5'8" and pick Brimson at fullback. Huge risk playing someone out of position in State of Origin, but I just think Ponga and Brimson are that good. It'd be good to get them into the 17 together, into the starting 13. And I don't think the options to partner Cherry Evans so Cherry Evans is obviously the halfback, so I don't think the other options to partner him are that interesting, so I'll legit do that. I But if they're going to go with a half, I'd probably just pick Ben Hunt. He's a reliable performer. He can tackle all that stuff. So, and then I've got Christian Welch and Jai Arrow, my starting props. Reid Marnie, I'm going to start him at hooker. I listened to the Kempy and Cameron Smith captain's run on SEN Sydney last week, and I completely agree with Cameron Smith. Maybe I did listen to him and then agree with him after he made his points, but he said they should pick Reid Marnie and then bring Grant off the bench, which I think is a good idea. Grant hasn't played much football this year, hasn't started any games, I don't believe, so let alone playing the 80. So I think him playing 80 in State of Origin would be way too much to ask for and would potentially limit his impact because he'd be, more worried about stamina. So I think playing Marnie, bringing Grant on, even if you bring him on early, like 20-minute mark, and you can sort of manage the subs. You can manage when you take him on and off. I just don't think 80 minutes is good for Harry Grant at the moment with his fitness levels. So I've got Marnie starting, Grant off the bench. Then in the back row, I've got David Fafita, and then I'm actually picking Jaden Sewer. I know Felice Kafusi's been there in the last few years, and most people have picked him there, but especially with the new rules, I think Jaden Sewer is one of the only enforcers that I trust that he won't get sim-binned or anything. He's one of the best tacklers in the game. Might not provide that much in attack, but I can't see what Kafusi brings to the table that Sewer doesn't. So I'd pick Sewer. Then I've got Tino Fasua Malawi in at lock. He's been really pretty good at the start of the season for the Titans. And yeah, he'll be there. And then as I mentioned, I got Grant at 14. Now that makes it tough because usually the 14 is the utility, so you'd have Brimson in at 14. But what I would actually consider, if Munster plays, obviously I said if Munster's out, I would have Brimson fullback, Ponga 6. But if Munster plays, I would actually just consider Grant and Brimson both on the bench. I think most Origin forwards, I know it's a very taxing game, and I think most of them are very fit, so I wouldn't be too worried about having 3 or 2 forwards on the bench. So I'd be tempted to go Grant, Brimson. Then I'd have Mo Fodawaker on the bench as well to rotate with the props. And then I'd also have Felice Kafusi as a bit of a back row option. So that's my team. But if you don't want Brimson on there because of Grant being on there. So Grant's my number one priority. Then if you don't want another utility on there, I would pick Jared Wallace. But we're starting to clutch at straws there. Josh Papali is obviously the big out through suspension. Very intrigued to see what happens with Cameron Munster. I do think if he is out, the New South Wales chances of victory do skyrocket because I think without Munster, they go from being a very dangerous team to just a very solid team with a couple dangerous players. So, yeah, that's, good news for a New South Wales fan, not good news for a rugby league fan as you want to see all the best players fit and firing for State of Origin. But, at this point, I'll do anything for a New South Wales dub. But let me know what you think of that Queensland team. Let me know who you'd be picking. And if I've missed or forgotten anyone or dogged anyone, let me know. Alright, moving on to the preview for round 12 of the NRL. I'll be going through my tips from each game and I'll be chatting about the major ins and outs. Alright, so Thursday night footy, Storm Broncos at Suncorp Stadium. Interesting scheduling as usual. Thankfully, the Broncos have been tucked away for a few weeks now, but they're copping prime time here. And I know they beat the Roosters last week, but I think the Storm are a different level to the Roosters. They're a different cup of gravy. Storm have Jerome Hughes back. Broncos have Anthony Milford replacing Tyson Gamble, who's out through suspension, I believe. I'm tipping Storm by 20. Friday night, we have the Cowboys-Warriors. I think this will actually be a really interesting game. I think the Warriors are very dangerous and the Cowboys are in great form. I'm actually tipping the Cowboys by 6. Tamalolo's out. Tabuai Fido's back. Warriors have named Walsh at 1 and Roger on the wing, which is exciting for Warriors fans. I'll be going for the Warriors. I really do like the Warriors team at the moment. Very exciting to watch. But I think the Cowboys will get the W, especially in Townsville. Tigers-Dragons, as they say on the Hello Sport podcast, battle of the dirty merger clubs. But Tigers have had a few changes. Roberts is on the wing, Jimmy the Jet, that is. Tom and Moan's coming in for his debut on the bench, which I'm very excited about. I think he's a very promising player, and then Tommy Taulat's been moved into the centres. Unfortunately, that means BJ Leilua drops out. So interesting to see what Talau does, because the amount of times they've picked him, they obviously have very high raps on him, but I'm yet to see it really happen on the field every weekend. And then the Dragons welcome back Tarek Sims, but still have a lot of outs from their lineup. I'm going the Tigers by 10. I think they won by about 10 last time. They played only a few weeks back, but I think the Tigers are in pretty good attacking form right now, and I don't know if the Dragons will be able to score enough points to beat them. But yeah, never really trust the Tigers, so I don't know. Panthers Bulldogs, Saturday 3 o'clock game. Really not much to talk about. Capewell's out, Leota's back. Bulldogs welcome back Hetherington and Josh Jackson, and then Jackson Topine. I don't know if it's Topine or like Topine or something, but he's at hooker. Tipping the Panthers by 40. Don't think that's a contest. South Eels, probably game of the round in my opinion. 5:30 Saturday game. Cam Murray and Jacob Host are back for the South's back row. Regan Campbell-Gillard is out for the Eels, which is massive. To be honest, that could be what has decided my tip here, but I'm going for Souths to win. I've only got them winning by 1 because I basically think it's a flip of a coin, but I just don't think the Eels are in that great a form, especially against the good teams. I know the Souths are in awful form themselves, but eventually they're going to bounce back. You'd imagine blokes like Latrell and Cody Walker are due for a big game, and I think this could be it. And I do think Regan Campbell-Gillard's a massive out. So, I'm going Souths in that one. Roosters versus the Raiders on the Central Coast. Now, if this was at the SCG, I'd say Roosters easy win. But the Central Coast puts it in doubt a little bit for me. But yeah, you can't tip the Raiders at the moment. I really like the Raiders. Love tipping them. But I can't tip them in this one, even though I think there is a small chance with the amount of ins they have. They've got Soliola, White and Rapana and Hodgson all back into the side. George Williams is obviously out. Sam Williams will play halfback. Roosters, Victor Radley's out and Josh Morris is in. But I'm going the Roosters by 4 in this one. I think it might be a lot closer than previous Raiders games, but not yet going to tip them with any confidence. Sunday game, Sharks-Titans. Sharks have a fair few out through suspension, but I think their ins are better than their outs, if you know what I mean. Mulatalo's back on the wing, which I think is really big. I think he provides a lot of spark for the Sharks. Talakai, same thing, provides a lot of spark. He's back. Ramian's back in the centres. Sean Johnson's back. They might be that might be a bit of injection of life, but I think the Titans will be too good. For Feeder's back, Ash Taylor's in the reserves. He's a chance to come back, and I think the Titans will be too good. I've tipped the Titans by 10. Knights Manly. Now, this is going to be at McDonald Jones Stadium. Should be a big crowd. And I don't know. I think the Knights might make this a bit more competitive than we are thinking. They do have Ponga Best coming back. Blake Green is retired, so that's an out for them. But for me, Manly's form's too good. I'm tipping Manly by 20. Sirinen comes in for Olaka Atu, who has been mysteriously dropped. I'm pretty sure it's through injury, but they didn't really name an injury. Ciro's back on the bench, and I just think I'd like to see the Knights push them, because the Knights are a good team to watch when they're up and going, but I think Manly will be too good. And that means my game picks, I know I've sort of said my tips there first, but I'll highlight my game picks for you. Short bet of the week, Panthers to beat the Bulldogs. Look, it'd be probably upset of the whole NRL history if the Bulldogs beat the Panthers. Upset of the week, the only upset I did tip was the Cowboys to beat the Warriors. They're paying $2 on Friday night, which I'm surprised at, but I do get it. Warriors are a very good team. Game spread, I don't like any of them too strongly, but Manly to cover the start of 11.5 points, it's not much given the way they're playing right now and the way the Knights are playing. If you think the Knights will come out and shock us, don't take that then. But if you think their current form lines will continue, we'll get on that. Titans with a minus 2.5 handicap. Look, that's not much, is it? I think the Titans will win. And if you think they're going to win by 2 or less, well, stay off this. But look, that's pretty rare that teams win by 2 or less. So I think that's a fair one. Cowboys with a head start of 1.5. Obviously, I tipped them, so I think that's going to happen. And then this is probably my smoky. This is the one I'm least confident in, but the Raiders to cover. The Raiders with a head start of 11.5 against the Roosters. I think they might be a lot more competitive than we're thinking this week. The Roosters aren't in great form, and the Raiders have a lot of ins. So I'm intrigued to see how that one plays out. I'll be going for the Raiders, that's for sure. But yeah, I was going to go through my NRL fantasy team this week. Didn't end up doing it. We'll probably start doing that weekly next week. All you need to know is that my team's in a shambles and I've dropped about 20,000 ranks after being like in the top 20k for a long time. But we'll take that. Let me know how your NRL fantasy teams or Supercoach teams are going if you do play. Let me know about my tips. And enjoy the week of footy. Looking forward to Origin. Hopefully the COVID stays away in Melbourne and we can get Origin in Melbourne at the MCG. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you after the weekend's action for a round 12 review and round 13 preview. Cheers.